The case of the bride being doused with acid on her own wedding day was one of the most violent crimes of my career. My name is Isaac Roberts. I am 42 years old, and I have been a detective with the Houston Police Department for 15 years. The call came in around 3 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. The bright Texas sun was mercilessly scorching the asphalt as my squad car pulled up to St. Michael's Church on the outskirts of Houston. The entrance was crowded with people in festive attire, guests of a wedding that never took place. Their faces expressed shock and confusion. Some women were crying, holding lace handkerchiefs to their eyes. Patrol Officer Rodriguez met me at the yellow police tape stretched around the entrance to the church. "Detective Roberts, the victim's already at the hospital. The ambulance took her away 20 minutes ago. It's a very serious situation. Acid on her face and upper body." "What do we know about the attacker?" I asked, putting on my gloves. "Nothing concrete yet. According to witnesses, the bride was preparing for the ceremony in a separate room. Suddenly there was a scream. By the time the guests came running in, she was already on the floor, and the assailant was gone." Rodriguez led me through the main hall of the church, where rows of wooden pews were decorated with white ribbons and flowers. A wedding arch of fresh flowers stood alone at the altar, a silent reminder of a celebration that never took place. The bride's room turned out to be a small room at the back of the church. It was chaotic: an overturned chair, scattered cosmetic items, and a damp stain on the floor with a pungent chemical odor. A suffocating odor hung in the air, making my throat sore. "Techs have already taken samples," Rodriguez said. "Preliminarily, it's concentrated sulfuric acid." I looked around the room, paying attention to every detail. On the table by the mirror was a veil, untouched, as if waiting for a bride who would never wear it again. Next to it was a framed photograph, a happy couple smiling against the backdrop of a city park. "The victim's name?" I asked. "Piper Harvey, 30 years old, works as an elementary school teacher at Oak Hill School. Today she was supposed to be the wife of Joshua Harvey, chef at the Blue Bayou restaurant." "Is Joshua Harvey still here?" "Yeah, he's in the main dining room. Refused to go to the hospital. Says he's too shocked and doesn't want Piper to see his reaction to her injuries. Afraid of only making things worse." I nodded and continued to look around. The window in the room was too small for someone to escape through. So the attacker went out the same door he came in through, and no one noticed him? Finished with the room inspection, I went to the main hall of the church, where one of the officers was gathering contact information for the guests. Joshua Harvey sat in the first pew with his head down on his hands. His black wedding suit looked immaculate, which provided an odd contrast to the general atmosphere of tragedy. "Mr. Harvey, I'm Detective Isaac Roberts. I'm very sorry about what happened to your fiancée." Joshua raised his head. His eyes were red and inflamed. "Why would anyone do something like that?" "Piper. She'd never hurt anyone." I sat down next to him, giving him time to gather his thoughts. "Can you think of anyone who would want to hurt your fiancée? Maybe she had conflicts at work, or someone who threatened her." Joshua shook his head. "No, nothing like that. She's just a teacher. The kids adore her. No enemies, no threats. It's just crazy." "What about you? Maybe someone wanted to harm you through her?" He shook his head again. "I'm just a cook, Detective. Yes, sometimes there are tense moments in the kitchen, but nothing serious. I can't imagine anyone around me being capable of such a thing. When was the last time you saw Piper before the attack?" This morning. We had a tradition of not seeing each other before the ceremony. I got to the church 2 hours before, and she showed up about an hour before. She went to the bride's room to get ready. And then..." His voice shook. "Then I heard a scream. I recorded his statement and left Joshua with one of the officers who was to escort him to the hospital later. I then proceeded to interview witnesses. Although there were about 70 people in the church, no one had seen anything. The guests were gathered in the main hall, chatting among themselves. The bride's closest relatives had helped her get ready, but had left a few minutes before the attack to give her time alone before the ceremony. Piper's mother, Eleanor Dawson, revealed through tears that she had left her daughter just 5 minutes before the incident. "She was so happy, Detective, shining like the sun. Who would do that to my little girl?" I had no answer. After interviewing a few more witnesses and getting nothing useful, I decided to head to the hospital to talk to Piper, if her condition permitted. Houston City Hospital greeted me with sterile white hallways and the smell of antiseptic. A nurse stopped me at the entrance to the ICU. "Miss Harvey is off limits, detective. She just came out of surgery." "How serious are her injuries?" The nurse pursed her lips. "Very serious. The acid damaged a significant portion of her face and neck. It's going to take several reconstructive surgeries. And even then..." She didn't finish the sentence, but it was clear enough. "When can I talk to her?" "Probably tomorrow. She's under a lot of painkillers right now." I left my card and asked her to let me know when Piper could testify. Then I contacted my partner, Daniel Coleman, who was in the process of reviewing the surveillance footage outside the church. "Anything?" I asked. "Nothing concrete yet," Daniel replied. "The cameras recorded all the guests, but no one suspicious. If the attacker got into the church, he did it discreetly or was among the guests. Check the cameras on the surrounding streets. See if you can track where the perpetrator went after the attack." The next morning, I got a call from the hospital. Piper Harvey had regained consciousness and could talk, although the doctors had warned that the conversation should be short. The ICU room was filled with the sounds of medical equipment. Piper lay on the bed, her face and neck hidden under bandages. Only her eyes were visible, full of pain and fear. "Miss Harvey, I'm Detective Isaac Roberts. Are you feeling well enough to answer a few questions?" She nodded weakly. "Did you see the man who attacked you?" "A woman," Piper whispered through the bandages. "She came in so suddenly. I thought it was my mom coming back, but it was a woman in dark clothes." "Did you see her face?" "No. It all happened too fast. She came in, I turned around, and the next moment I felt this terrible pain." Her voice shook. "Did the woman say anything?" "No, not a word." "Have you ever seen this woman before? Maybe noticed anything in particular? Height, build, hair color?" Piper tried to focus, but then shook her head. "I don't remember. It was all a blur. She was of average height, I guess. Couldn't see her face, though." I asked a few more questions, but Piper had little to add. The doctor soon asked me to leave, pointing out the rising readings on the monitors. The patient needed rest. In the hallway, I met Joshua Harvey. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. "How was she?" he asked me in a shaky voice. "She's hanging in there." She was able to answer a few questions. "Did she recognize who did it?" I shook my head. "No, only that it was a woman." Joshua rubbed his face with his hands. "A woman? But who? And why Piper?" I asked him again if anyone could have wanted to hurt him or Piper, and again I got a negative answer. "Mr. Harvey, I need to know everything about your relationship. Did you have any fights? Any ex-partners who might have held grudges?" "No, detective. Piper and I were fine. We dated for 3 years, lived together for the last 2. No serious problems. As for exes, my last girlfriend before Piper moved to California 4 years ago. Piper didn't have anyone serious before me either, as far as I know." I asked a few more questions, but got nothing useful. Joshua seemed genuinely puzzled and upset about what had happened. Back at the station, I found Daniel in front of a computer screen. "Did you find anything on the cameras?" "Nothing concrete. Too many people coming in and out of the church. Without a clear description of the suspect, it's hard to say anything." I sat down at my desk and started organizing the information. The attack happened indoors, in a church full of people, but no one saw anything. The attacker is a woman who somehow got into the bride's room, poured acid on her, and went unnoticed. "You know, it sounds like a crime of jealousy or revenge," Daniel said, interrupting my musings. "Maybe some woman thought Joshua Harvey should have married her instead of Piper. Joshua claims he hasn't had a serious relationship in recent years, except with Piper." "And you believe him?" I shrugged. "So far, I have no reason not to believe him, but we'll definitely check into his background." "Maybe this isn't about Joshua. Maybe one of Piper's co-workers, a rejected admirer among the parents of her students." It was a reasonable theory. I sent a request for Piper and Joshua's personnel files, as well as a list of employees at the school where Piper worked and the Blue Bayou restaurant where Joshua worked. Over the next 2 days, Daniel and I interviewed Piper's co-workers at the school. They were all shocked by what had happened and described her as a sweet, responsible teacher, loved by the children and respected by the parents. No hint of conflict or strange situations. We then visited the Blue Bayou restaurant. The owner, Ernest Johnson, expressed his condolences and provided us with a list of employees. Joshua's coworkers also could not recall anything suspicious. Joshua was characterized as a calm, professional chef with no apparent conflicts. One of the waitresses, Tamara Green, mentioned that the new hostess, Jane Powell, who had been working at the restaurant for about a year, seemed upset in recent weeks. But whether that had anything to do with Joshua, she didn't know. We tried to talk to Jane, but it turns out she didn't show up for work the day of the attack and didn't show up afterward either. According to the manager, she called in sick. This information made me wary, but without more evidence, it could have been a mere coincidence. By the end of the week, we still had no clear suspects. The theory of a random attack by a mentally unstable woman was becoming more and more likely. It was possible that the attacker had chosen Piper at random, simply as a symbol of the happiness she herself lacked. I went back to the hospital to talk to Piper again. Her condition had stabilized, though there were more surgeries to come. "Detective Roberts," her voice was quieter than usual. "I'm trying to remember, but it's all a blur." "Take your time, Miss Harvey. Any detail could be important." "Joshua says you think the attacker was a random lunatic." "That's one theory," I replied cautiously. "We don't have a lot of leads yet." I think she knew where she was going. She didn't hesitate, didn't look for me. She just walked in and—" Piper stopped talking, her eyes filled with tears. That detail made me wonder. If her attacker acted so confidently, perhaps she was familiar with the layout of the church or had followed Piper beforehand. I said goodbye to Piper and went out into the hallway where Daniel was waiting for me. "We need to check the security cameras in the area of the church a few days before the attack," I said. "Our suspect may have staked out the place beforehand." We went back to the station and immersed ourselves in reviewing the footage. It was painstaking work, but we had no other way. While we were looking for a needle in a haystack, Piper Harvey's life was ruined. The call rang at 3 a.m, jerking me out of a restless sleep. I fumbled for the phone on the bedside table and put it to my ear. "Detective Roberts." My voice was hoarse from lack of sleep. "Detective, this is Sergeant Turner on duty. There's been an attack on Piper Harvey at City Hospital. Someone tried to kill her. The dream was gone in an instant." I sat up on the bed with the nightlight on. "Is she alive?" "Yeah. Attacker missed. Uniforms are on the scene, but the captain asked you to come right away." 20 minutes later, I was parked outside the hospital. The lights of Houston were shining at night, but I didn't care for the beauty of the cityscape. The red and blue lights of police cars flashed at the hospital entrance. A patrol officer escorted me to the 3rd floor, where Piper's room was located. Daniel met me in the hallway. He looked as bruised and sleep-deprived as I was. "What happened?" I asked without preamble. Around 2:30 in the morning, a nurse heard a noise in Piper's room. As she entered, she saw a woman in dark clothing and a balaclava aiming a gun at the patient. The nurse screamed and the attacker fired but missed. The bullet hit a pillow a few centimeters from Piper's head. The perpetrator then fled through the emergency exit. Did Piper see her attacker? Yeah, but the bandages on her face limited her view. All she says is that she was a medium-sized woman wearing a balaclava. We went into Piper's room. There was a police officer at the door. It was semi-dark inside, with only a small lamp illuminating the patient's face, still half hidden under bandages. Her eyes were wide open, frightened, unblinking. "Miss Harvey," I began softly. "How do you feel?" "Like someone who's being hunted." Her voice sounded broken. "Tell me what happened." Piper swallowed. "I didn't sleep well. The pain, it kept me awake. I heard the door open, and I thought it was the nurse coming to give me a shot. But something made me open my eyes. She was standing at the foot of the bed all black. Her face was gone. A gun in her hand. I didn't even have time to be scared. It was so unreal. And then I heard a nurse shriek in the hallway. The stranger turned her head at the sound, and that's when the shot rang out. "Can you say anything about her build, height, movement patterns?" Piper thought for a moment. "Average height, slim but not thin. She moved, confident, like she knew exactly where she was going." I wrote down the statement and asked a few more questions, but Piper had little to add. After a brief conversation, I left her to rest under the guard of a police officer and walked out into the hallway where Daniel was talking to the nurse who'd found her attacker. Emily Clark. Daniel introduced me to a full, middle-aged woman with a tired face. She was the first to see the perpetrator. Miss Clark, can you describe your attacker? She was wearing a balaclava, but you can't see her face. Medium height, slim build. She moved quickly, but not frantically. Looks like a woman, but it's hard to tell for sure. Does the hospital have video surveillance? Yes, there are cameras at all entrances and in the hallways. I thanked the nurse and went to hospital security with Daniel. The head of security, a military-looking man named Ray Thompson, was already waiting for us in the control room. We've been going over the security footage for the last 4 hours, he said, pointing to the screens. This is the moment when the Jane Doe leaves the building through the emergency exit. The screen showed a figure in black moving quickly down the stairs. The face was indeed concealed by a balaclava. How did she get to the hospital? I asked. That's interesting. Thompson switched to another camera. This is the main entrance, recorded at 23:45. Notice the woman in the blue jacket. A young, dark-skinned woman appeared on the screen, entering through the main entrance. She was unmasked, looking completely normal. No one would have noticed her in the hospital lobby. Are you sure it was her? Yeah, we tracked her movements on the cameras. She went up to the 3rd floor, wandered the halls for a while, then disappeared into the restroom. She came out wearing black clothes and a balaclava on her head. Can you get a closer look at her face? Thompson zoomed in. Now I could see the woman's face. Young, attractive, with expressive eyes. Her hair was gathered in a tight bundle at the back of her head. Print out this image, please, I asked, and copy all the records for our department. While Thompson did my bidding, I turned to Daniel. Any guesses? Same perp, he said. First the acid attack, now attempted murder. Someone really wants Piper Harvey dead. And that someone is a woman who knows her way around a hospital pretty well. Maybe a frequent visitor to one of the patients. Or related to Joshua Harvey, I added. We should show him this image. After printing out the photo, we left the hospital. In the parking lot, I told Daniel, go to the station, prepare a warrant to check Joshua Harvey's phone records, and run that woman through the databases. I'll head over to Joshua's house. Daniel nodded and got into his car. I checked the time, almost 5 in the morning. A little early for a visit, but it was urgent. Joshua Harvey lived in a neat little house in the suburbs of Houston. No one answered my call. I called his cell phone, long beeps and no answer. That's weird. I walked around the house, looked in the windows. It was dark and quiet inside. The neighbor's house also looked lifeless. Only the far neighbor had a light on. I knocked on his door. An elderly man in a plaid robe appeared on the doorstep a minute later. What can I do for you? He asked, eyeing me suspiciously. I showed my badge. Detective Isaac Roberts. I'm looking for Joshua Harvey, but he's not home. You haven't seen him today? No, but his car left around midnight. I was just letting the dog out. Whether he's back or not, I can't tell you. I go to bed early. I thanked my neighbor and went back to my car. If Joshua had left at midnight and still hadn't returned, it could be a coincidence or connected to the attack at the hospital. Either way, I needed to find him. I called the Blue Bayou restaurant. Despite the early hour, it was already bustling with activity as the cooks prepared for breakfast. Joshua? The receptionist who answered the phone. No, he wouldn't be in today. He took the day off because of his fiancé's accident. Was he working yesterday? Yeah, he was on the evening shift. He left around 11 o'clock. I blacked out and thought about it. The time matched the neighbor's statement. Where would Joshua go at this hour? To the hospital? But there was no mention of his visit there. I contacted Daniel. What about the warrant? Already signed. One more thing, Isaac. I showed the woman's photo from the cameras to our computer tech. He went through Joshua Harvey's social media and found this woman in several of his photos. Her name is Jane Powell, and she works as a hostess at the same restaurant as Joshua. It was a lead. I remembered that Jane Powell's name was mentioned when we interviewed the restaurant's employees. She didn't show up for work the day Piper was attacked. Nice work. Did you check her address? Yeah, we got an address from the restaurant's personnel file. Sending it to you. 10 minutes later, I was pulling up to the West Houston apartment building where Jane Powell was renting. As I parked the car, I noticed a familiar vehicle a few spaces away from me. It was Joshua Harvey's car. The multi-story building didn't look luxurious, but it didn't look like a slum either. Just ordinary housing for a single working woman. I went up to the fourth floor and found apartment number 27. There was no sound coming from the door. I knocked, but there was no response. "Police! Open up!" I said louder. A minute later, footsteps were heard. The door opened on a chain, and Joshua Harvey peered through the crack. When he saw me, he looked confused. "Detective Roberts? What are you doing here?" "Let me in, Mr. Harvey. We need to talk." He hesitated, but then closed the door, removed the chain, and opened the door fully. He was wearing the same clothes as yesterday, only badly creased. "Come in," he said, letting me into the small, modestly furnished apartment. I looked around. There were 2 cups of coffee on the coffee table and a plate of dinner leftovers. A woman's blouse hung on the back of a chair. "Joshua, I take it you know Jane Powell?" I asked him bluntly. He looked away. "Yes, she works at our restaurant." "Is that all? Because last night this woman broke into the hospital and tried to kill your fiancé with a gunshot to the head." Joshua turned pale and sank heavily onto the couch. "It can't be," he whispered. "Where is Jane now?" "I don't know. She came out about an hour ago, said she had something to do." "Joshua, you better tell the truth. Why are you in the apartment of the woman who tried to kill your fiancé?" He put his hands over his face. "It's a mistake. Jane couldn't. She would never. But she was here tonight? After midnight?" He was silent for a moment, then nodded reluctantly. "Yes. I arrived around 12. We talked." "About what?" "Look, detective, it's not what it looks like." "What does it look like, Joshua?" My voice got harder. "It looks like you're spending the night with the woman who tried to kill your fiancé twice, while Piper lies in the hospital with her face mangled." "I didn't know," he almost shouted. "I swear I didn't know it was Jane who attacked Piper. But you knew there was something between you and Jane, and you kept it from the police." Joshua swallowed and turned away. "Do I need a lawyer?" "That's your right, but it's in your best interest to tell me the truth right now. Otherwise, I may consider you an accessory to attempted murder." The threat had an effect. Joshua took a deep breath and began to speak. "Jane and I, we were having an affair. She came to work at the restaurant about a year ago. At first we were just friends, then it turned into something more. I never promised her anything serious. She knew I was going to marry Piper. At least I thought she knew and accepted it." "And yet you continued to see her even as you were preparing to get married?" He lowered his head. "I tried to end our relationship several times. The last time was a month before the wedding. Told her it was over between us, that I loved Piper. Jane seemed upset, but calm. I thought she understood. And then Piper was attacked, and I had no idea it was Jane." "Why did you go to see her tonight?" "She called. Said she was in a bad way, that she wanted to do something to herself. I got scared, so I came over. We talked, she cried, said she couldn't live without me. But I swear she never said a word about Piper or the attacks." I looked at Joshua carefully. He looked genuinely shocked, but I needed proof, not emotion. "Would you allow me to look around the apartment?" Yeah, sure. I didn't touch anything." I started in the living room, then went to the small kitchen, the bathroom, and finally the bedroom. In the closet, I found black clothing similar to the one my attacker wore in the hospital. In the dresser drawer, an empty gun box, and in the bathroom trash can, a receipt for sulfuric acid from a hardware store dated the day before the wedding. I gathered all the evidence into evidence bags, called forensics and additional officers to stake out the apartment. I asked Joshua to come with me to the station for a statement. "Am I under arrest?" he asked. "Not yet. But I need a detailed statement about your relationship with Jane." Suddenly, another phone in my pocket rang, a work phone. "Detective Roberts," I answered. "Detective, this is Officer Riley at City Hospital. We have a situation. A female suspect was spotted in the lobby. When security tried to stop her, she fled. Jane Powell was at the hospital?" Yes, sir. Cameras picked her up 10 minutes ago. We're canvassing the area now, but so far no luck. Increase security on Piper Harvey's room. I'm on my way." Jane just tried to break into the hospital again. Any idea why she'd do that? What's on her mind? Joshua went pale. "Oh my God. She said something weird when she left this morning." "What was it?" "Something like, 'It'll all be over soon, and we'll be together.' I thought she meant she'd get over her depression, but now..." I didn't finish listening and rushed to the car. On the way to the hospital, I contacted Daniel and told him about the new threat. He promised to come as soon as he sent patrolmen to other addresses. The atmosphere at the hospital was tense. Security had been beefed up, and 2 officers were on duty at the entrance to the ward where Piper was lying. "She didn't come through here," one of them reported. "We're checking everyone." I went up to Piper's floor and saw another officer at the door to her room. "How's she doing?" I asked. "Scared, but she's hanging in there." The doctor gave her a sedative. I looked into the room. Piper was lying on the bed, staring at the ceiling, unblinking. "Miss Harvey," I called softly. She turned her head. "Detective Roberts, I was told she was back." "Yes, but we won't let her in here. You're safe." "Who is she? Why does she want to kill me?" I came closer. "Her name is Jane Powell. She works at the same restaurant as Joshua." "Why?" There was more confusion in her voice than fear. "She and Joshua had a relationship." I decided not to hide the truth. He tried to break it off, but she wouldn't let him go. A tear rolled down Piper's cheek. "Joshua was cheating on me?" "I guess so. I'm sorry you have to find out this way." She closed her eyes. "You know, when you're lying there with your face mangled like that, you start to see things differently. I'm almost grateful to her. Better to know the truth now than to live a lie." I was shocked at her stamina. At that moment, an agitated officer appeared at the door. "Detective, the captain wants to see you right away. I think they found Jane Powell." I ran out of Piper Harvey's room, leaving the police officer with her, and hurried toward the ward exit. Downstairs in the hospital lobby, Captain Warren, a stout man with gray hair on his temples and an attentive gaze, was waiting for me. "Roberts," he nodded briefly. "We got her." "Where?" The patrolman spotted a suspicious woman in the park across the street. "Looks like she was watching the hospital." She didn't resist arrest, but she didn't deny involvement. "Did she say anything?" "Just that she wanted to talk to Joshua Harvey. She didn't say anything else. They took her down to the station." I nodded and pulled out my cell phone. "I should let Daniel know." "He already knows," the captain said. "He's waiting for you at the station. We've beefed up security here, just in case. You go ahead. I'll stay here." On the way to the station, I thought about Joshua Harvey. Either he really didn't realize Jane was capable of such violence, or he was a great actor. Either way, I was sure he knew a lot more than he was telling me. At the station, the first thing I did was head to the interrogation room where Joshua was waiting. He was sitting there with his head bowed and his arms wrapped around it. "Detective," he looked up when I walked in. "Did you find her?" "Yes, Mr. Harvey. Jane Powell's been arrested." She was watching the hospital from the park across the street. He closed his eyes as if in pain. "Oh my God, this is a nightmare." I sat across from him and put the evidence folder on the table. "Joshua, it's time for full disclosure. We have evidence of your affair with Jane Powell. You've been lying to us from the beginning." I opened the folder and started laying photos on the table. "Here are your phone records. Hundreds of calls over the last few months. The last one was 2 hours before the acid attack. Here's surveillance footage from the restaurant. You and Jane in the back room a week ago. There's social media photos of the two of you together. And finally, your own texts to Jane where you promised her a future together. 3 days before the wedding. The last printout was provided by the tech department who recovered the deleted messages from Joshua's phone. He stared at the evidence with a glazed look. "Explain it to me, Joshua." My voice became harder. "What was really going on between you two?" He took a deep breath and looked up at me. "I loved them both," he said quietly. "It sounds awful, I know, but it's true. Piper, she was stability, reliability. I saw a future with her. A home, children, a quiet life. And Jane, she was different. Passion, adrenaline, unpredictability. And you decided you could have them both?" "No," he shook his head. "I knew I had to choose. And I chose Piper. I really loved her, wanted to live with her. But every time I tried to break things off with Jane, she had a way of convincing me to stay." "How?" "First, by threatening to hurt herself. Once I found her with a cut vein. Superficial, but there was a lot of blood. Then she started saying she was going to tell Piper about us. And the week before the wedding, she told me she was pregnant with my baby." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that true?" "I don't know." He ran his hand over his face. "She didn't show me the tests, didn't go to the doctor in front of me. But it sounded convincing. I panicked. That's why I wrote her that message, that we'd find a way out, be together. I needed time to figure it out. And then you decided to marry Piper after all? Yes. The day before the wedding, I told Jane I couldn't cancel the ceremony, that it would destroy Piper. I promised we'd talk about it after the honeymoon. She seemed, disappointed, but calm. Said she understood that she'd give me time. I had no idea what she was planning. Had she never shown any aggression before? Joshua wondered. Once, about 5 months ago, she smashed all the plates in the restaurant kitchen when I canceled our meeting because of Piper's birthday. And another time, she scratched my car with a key when she saw Piper pick me up after work. But nothing serious. Nothing that would suggest, something like that. I nodded, taking notes. Do you think you encouraged her to attack Piper? I don't know. He covered his face with his hands. Maybe if I'd been more honest with her, if I hadn't given her false hopes. But I never thought she was capable of such violence. I watched him carefully. Joshua looked genuinely remorseful, but that didn't change the point. By his indecision and lies, he had created the situation that led to the tragedy. Why did you keep this from us from the beginning? He looked up at me with eyes full of shame. How could I have confessed? My fiancée was in the hospital with a burned face, her life ruined, and I was supposed to say that I'd cheated on her with my coworker? That maybe I was responsible for what happened to her? I thought it could be anyone but Jane. And when did you realize it was her? When you showed me the surveillance photos. I recognized her right away, but, I didn't want to believe it. I was still hoping it was a mistake, a coincidence. I closed the file and got up. Mr. Harvey, I'm going to have to ask you to stay at the station. We're going to need a formal statement. And perhaps your help in talking to Jane Powell. He nodded without looking up. I understand. Do I deserve to be punished for withholding information? That's for the prosecutor to decide, I said. But right now, your cooperation may help mitigate the possible consequences. I left him with the officer to process the statement and headed to another interview room, where Daniel was already waiting for me at the door. She's inside, he said quietly. Silent as a fish. All she's asking for is Joshua. We're not bringing him in until we get something from her, I said. What did the search of her apartment turn up? Found acid residue in the bathroom, hidden behind the pipes. The gun was found in the trash can behind the house, and the best part is that in the desk drawer was a diary she'd been planning the attack for weeks. There are detailed notes about Piper's schedule, the church plan, even calculations of how much acid it would take to... He didn't finish the sentence. Guaranteed to disfigure his face, I finished for him. Daniel nodded. Also, no pregnancy. There's a record of her lying to Joshua about it to keep him. I took a deep breath and opened the door to the interview room. Jane Powell sat at the table with her hands folded in front of her. She looked like an ordinary young woman, pretty with intelligent eyes. Nothing in her appearance betrayed a person capable of such cruelty. Miss Powell, I'm Detective Isaac Roberts. Would you like some water? She shook her head. I want to see Joshua. I'm afraid that's not possible right now. We need to talk first. I have nothing to say to you. I sat down across from her and opened the evidence folder. We have all the evidence of your attacks on Piper Harvey. Fingerprints on the acid bottle, video footage of you breaking into the hospital, witness statements, and, of course, your diary, where you detailed all your plans. She didn't show any surprise. So? You're facing a charge of attempted murder. That's very serious, Miss Powell. But if you agree to cooperate, to tell us what happened, it may help you at sentencing. She was silent, studying her hands. Joshua told us about your relationship, I continued. About how you threatened to hurt yourself if he left you. About the false pregnancy. Everything. Something changed in her eyes. He told you? Yes. And now he's giving formal testimony against you. It was a half-truth. Joshua was indeed testifying, but I deliberately emphasized the word against to elicit an emotional response. He can't, she whispered. He loves me. He loves Piper, Miss Powell. He chose her, and now, after what you've done, he thinks you're dangerous and mentally unstable. Those words hit the mark. her face contorted with pain and anger. "He's lying. He promised me we'd be together, that we'd find a way out." When had he promised that? She flinched. "It doesn't matter. He loved me, I know. And this Piper, she was just a convenient choice. Safe. Boring. Is that why you decided to throw acid on her? To make her less attractive to Joshua?" "I wanted him to see her real face," Jane hissed. "To realize that beauty doesn't last forever, that he was happier with me, that I loved him more, was willing to fight for him. And when that didn't work, you decided to kill her?" "I knew he wouldn't leave her after what happened, because of guilt. But if she had died, he would have grieved and moved on. With me." Her words sounded so cold and calculating that even I, who had seen a lot in my years of service, shuddered. "Do you realize that you changed Piper's life forever? That even after multiple surgeries, she'll never look the same again? Do you realize that he broke my heart?" she countered. "That he promised me a future and then just threw it away like a used piece of clothing? That he made me believe he loved me, and all the while he was going to marry someone else?" There was such genuine pain in her voice that for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "That doesn't excuse what you did, Miss Powell. I'm not looking for excuses." She leaned back in her chair. "I did what I thought was right, and I'd do it again if I could. You feel no remorse?" "All I feel is that Joshua betrayed me. Again." I wrote down what she said and closed my notebook. "Jane Powell, you're under arrest for attempted murder and grievous bodily harm. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot pay for an attorney, one will be provided for you by the state. Do you understand your rights?" She nodded, keeping her eyes on me. "Can I see Joshua?" "No." Her gaze faded. "Then I have nothing more to say." I walked out of the interview room, leaving her with the officer to process the arrest. Daniel was waiting for me in the hallway. "Cold-blooded," he said. "Not a shred of remorse." "Passion can make people ruthless," I replied. She truly believed that Joshua belonged to her, that he belonged with her, and she was willing to remove any obstacle. "And Joshua? What's going to happen to him?" "The prosecutor will consider accessory after the fact, but I doubt it will go to trial. He's morally guilty, but not legally. There was no evidence that he knew of her plans or encouraged them." The next day I visited Piper at the hospital. She already knew about Jane's detention and Joshua's confession. "How do you feel?" I asked, sitting down next to her bed. "Strangely relieved," she replied. "I know now that it was no accident, no madness of fate, just human cruelty, jealousy, betrayal. I can live with that. Joshua wanted me to tell you that he'd like to visit you, if you're ready." She was silent for a long time, staring out the window at the blue Texas sky. "Tell him now is not the time. Maybe later, when this whole thing doesn't hurt so much." I nodded, realizing she wasn't just talking about the physical wounds. "What's going to happen next?" she asked. "With Jane? With the investigation?" "There will be a trial. Given the evidence and her confession, she'll probably get the maximum sentence. You'll probably have to testify, but we'll try to make the process as traumatic as possible." "And Joshua? Will he be tried?" "There's no evidence that he was involved in the attacks. He withheld information about his relationship with Jane, but legally that's not a crime. The prosecutor might consider obstruction of justice, but the case would likely be limited to a fine." She nodded, accepting that information. "You know, Detective, I never thought I'd find myself at the center of a crime story. I always thought of myself as ordinary, even boring. An elementary school teacher planning a quiet family life. In my practice, Miss Harvey, the most dramatic stories often happen to the most ordinary people. Because love, jealousy, betrayal, they don't choose by status or profession." She smiled weakly under her bandages. "Thank you for solving this case, Detective Roberts. Now at least I know the truth." I said goodbye to her and left the room. Joshua Harvey was standing in the hallway, nervously fiddling with a bouquet of flowers. "She doesn't want to see me?" he asked when he saw my face. "She needs time, Mr. Harvey. You must understand and respect that." He nodded and lowered his head. "I've ruined everything, haven't I? Ruined everything. You made the wrong choice. Several times, I answered. But life doesn't end here. Not for you, not for Piper. What happens next is up to both of you. I left him in the hallway, holding the unwanted bouquet, and headed for the hospital exit. Another case was over. Another story had come to its sad conclusion. And all because of human weakness, indecision, and the desire to have everything at once without making hard choices.